let's get started from a blank screen. We'll activate Quickdraw, which, as you'll see, will forever change how you go about approaching BIM. With a few inputs, not only has Jacob created a slab, but also a slab and 4 walls. Quickdraw remains active, and so by highlighting a side or an edge on that space, we can add a dimension and change that from a single space to an L-shaped space. Check. How can we end up using BIMdraw to, how should we think about using BIMdraw?
Yeah. Well, this mic doesn't work. Now it works. Okay, thanks. So these final years, the last 2 or 3 years, we really started to look in how we can speed up the process of prototyping. This is very important, since if you're designing something, especially conceptual design, you're still thinking through alternatives. So you want to have the tools to quickly have the main contours of your design up there, that you can look at some variants, can try something out. In other words, you want to think through your designing. It's the way that people have done it for centuries with pencil and paper. And now we're trying to bring this quick prototyping into a full CAD product. So if you think about prototyping buildings, what you want to get there as fast as possible are the main volumes. You don't want to bother too much about creating all the individual walls, slabs. You just want to have like the main volume of your building there, the main volume of your rooms, so that you have like a quick visual control on how your overall building is going to look.
So can we say that with Quickdraw, Jacob is playing the game of design?
Yeah. Well, this is an inside joke, because actually, when we started looking to create such a building tool, we actually drew some inspiration from a game that a few of us used to play when we were teenagers, where you could very easily build kind of a building. But of course, this was just some initial inspiration, how you can quickly draw rooms. We had to bring this idea and this interface to a real CAD product with all the complexities of continuous dimensions, dynamic dimensions, creating the correct connections between your walls, T-connections, miters, and so on.
It is a mindset changer when you think about how you can not only create spaces with it, but you can edit them in different ways to create more refined and detailed designs pretty quickly. It's also complemented by other tools such as BIM drag that allow you to quickly build on top of what you're doing with Quickdraw to explore design alternatives in a quicker way. One thing to also point your attention to is the size of the workspace that Jacob is working with. He's mainly using the approach of using the quad, and he's got a toolbar across the top. But he has a lot of area to do modeling on. He could have the ribbon displayed. He could also have a number of toolbars, but this maximizes what he can do with the workspace. Also, one thing to know is that you'll see icons on the right side. Here you can access the properties panel, profiles, components, and on the left side, you'll see that he has icons that allow him to access the new project browser as well as the structure browser. So it puts a lot at his fingertips, and if you want to adjust and reconfigure that, you're able to as well. One thing to note, you may have already noticed this, is that when Jacob is moving things around, you'll see a ruler appear. What this is allowing him to do is set a distance or understand what distance he's moving that object within the model. And so rather than having to select a snap point or select a random point and then make another move to get it where you want, you're able to move it around on the scale with the ruler and have a better understanding, which allows you to model more quickly. You'll also see us use commands that you may have seen before, such as connect. You're all familiar with how walls can be connected, and last year we showed how structural members can be connected. Shortly we'll show a new way that connect can be used on MEP as well. There are multiple things that you can do at once when you start modeling with a tool such as this. By extending the wall, what we're actually doing is also splitting the slab into 2 separate members as well. And we can separate those, and then we can start to quickly work with them independently and use tools such as BIM drag to change the height of them and reposition them for something that we'll do a bit down the road when we start showing how Propagate works. One of the things that you'll notice with this is that as you're able to use these tools such as Quickdraw, such as a range of others that you're able to model more quickly, then the modeling tool ends up becoming part of the creative palette. You're able to not be limited by or think about the limitations of what the tool you're working with is. It can help you start to shape the ideas and explore ideas in new and different ways. And it allows you to take your ideas farther, further, and faster. So we're starting to get a basic form in place, and we can add a roof to initially put a closure on top of this, on top of the first floor. Now, as we looked at as we consider the exterior, we kind of need something to make it a bit more interesting, so we can start to explore a design idea. The design idea may come from pulling on a boundary to creating a solid that then we have another face that we can drag across. It could be something as simple as offsetting an edge that creates another boundary that allows us to extend a portion of the wall that maybe starts to trigger a thought about an idea. And maybe with that, we're starting to see something that might be interesting to carry to the other side of the building. So we could select it, and again, Jacob's showing the ruler. So we could select that, and then we can use a tool called the manipulator, which you've seen before, that will allow us to quickly make a mirrored copy and include that copy of that solid on the other side. But what you can start to think about is how you can use and mold these and shape these solids such as clay. So you're able to do a number of different things, just reinforcing how powerful the manipulator is. But you can view these solids as clay. You can decide whether you want to look at a surface or create boundaries. The idea of maybe once you start to do this, you're starting to see that band across the top, and so the concept of a flowing band or flowing border around the design might be something interesting to pursue. So you're quickly able to adjust those solids and shape them in ways that allow you to explore that rather than having to spend a lot of time modeling it to get there. And maybe we decide to carry that band down to the base level so that we're starting to see it wrap upwards across the first level and to the roof as well. We could also add a little flair to it with using the manipulator in another way to where we can rotate that face and create the leg there. Now that we've started this idea of the flowing border, flowing band across two sides, let's bring them together across the front. Again, you're seeing us use a common set of tools to get there. And once you start utilizing those tools, you'll find you're modeling with a rhythm that allows you to do some very interesting things. If we look at this and say that maybe we want to play with that roof plane a little bit, we can highlight the surfaces of the roof that we want to move. We can also select the bottom and top surfaces of that band. And we can use our friend the manipulator again. And one thing to note is that you also have predefined selection options on the manipulator, or you can set the angle that you want directly. So now we've got our walls didn't come with that move, but we can easily connect them to it by just selecting aligned surfaces and then attaching them to the roof. So very quickly, we're starting to bring this design together. One of the other things we can do is to align with the band that's on the front of the parapet, we can select that point as a reference point, carry it back to the wall, and then draw a rectangle to create a void. This allows us to start to further develop that idea of the flowing band on this side. And then, of course, we'll need to carry it all the way around, so we want to bring a solid into play there that we can simply start to push and pull to further develop the idea of of this flowing band. So now you're seeing it starting to carry across all parts of the first level. Sorry, I keep wanting to say second floor. And based on where we selected that start point for how we started to create the void, now when we bring this wall forward, it's aligned with that parapet. So you can use precision where you want to. You can model quickly in other areas that you want to. And then we can complete this idea by carrying this leg down to the base level. And then again, using the manipulator to change the orientation of it. And in this case, we'll shift the whole angle of it outward a bit. But as you can see, the manipulator can be used in a number of different ways. So now we have this idea of this flowing band that starts at the ground level, goes up around the first level, and all the way up to the roof. We can add more context to this as well pretty quickly by adding a site. We'll just put a site plane in there for reference currently. Since we've got this design in place and we've been adding more detail to it, we can start exploring how we can start to incorporate glazing into it as well. The original design has a pool in this area that's created to the left of this long wall. So one of the things that might be interesting is to put a glass panel wall along that longer wall plane. We can do that with another new tool called Panelize. And what this allows you to do is you can create a grid. You can refine, it gives you a default grid, and you can refine the size of that grid however you want. Once the grid's defined, we can use BIM Create Window that we can select from the quad to quickly create this glass pane wall. So check, we're starting to add more detail and shape the design of this building. What are other approaches and ways that we can add further detail to the model?
Well, I actually first want to point to the fact that so far we just focused on geometric modeling. We really believe in the philosophy that you have to give architects a tool to quickly get their geometric design out there to like the way they like it, without having to bother about classifications or materials or other kinds of BIM data. First, just go for your conceptual design. That's also why we released last year a free modeler, but everything that Jacob has done until now, you can also do in this free modeler shape. Of course, we're here in the real BIM product, and now it is really time to get into adding the BIM data. Because if you let the user first focus on all the geometry, you have to give him a little assist afterwards with adding the BIM data, or it would be a very tedious work to manually label all walls, assign all compositions, etc. We started investigating this. Well, the process, we call it, is BIMifying a model. And we try to automate it as much as possible, and we're using there some techniques of artificial intelligence, which we blend with other techniques of algorithms. 2 years ago, we actually started with first classifying solids, so that if you have just geometry there, that you can know which one are the walls, which one are the slabs, which one are the columns. Last year, we added to the BIMify process that we could also detect where are the buildings, where are the stories. And this year, BIMify has been extended a lot more even. We now can, well, we have improved the classifier. We can also classify block refs now. We improved the classification of HVAC elements, which wasn't that good yet. We also, if there is structural profiles in your model, just in geometry, for instance, you imported some geometry, we can match them with the profile name in our libraries. One final thing, we also now detect automatically the rooms, and because we have the rooms, we can also detect where are the external and the internal walls of the building, and this will come in very handy once Jacob will start adding compositions.
Great, thanks, Czech. Now let's see BIMify in action. So now that we have all the exterior glazing, or at least the initial design ideas there, we can launch BIMify, and what this allows us to do is it has been enhanced as well, so that we can, if we want to just do classifications, we can do that, or as Czech mentioned, we can do sections, elevations, floor plans, and so let's go ahead and keep everything selected. So it moves fast, and everything that we had checked on there is being applied to the model and classifying it and organizing it further, so that when Jacob accesses the structure browser, we're able to see that the building is now, all the elements are under the building, they have all floors, there's sections, everything is classified so that now we can start to add additional detail to carry our design further faster. So there are a number of ways that we can do this. Now that BIMify has provided such a great starting point, we can select things directly from the structure browser. In this case, we'll select a set of walls. And in this case, it's interior walls. We can activate the compositions panel, and once we isolate the set of compositions that we want to work with, we can drag and drop that directly from the compositions panel into the model. And so what you're seeing now is there's icons appear, and the green check icons allow you to switch the reference surface of that wall. And so once that's been done, then when you finish the command, those compositions have been applied to that set of walls. We can also do the same for a second set of walls, and in this case, we'll look at some of the exterior walls. Again, you can quickly use the same process of dragging and dropping the composition from the compositions panel onto the BIM, or the developing BIM. You still have the same options of selecting the reference surfaces, and then you can apply those to the BIM as well. Now that's great that you can select those classified components, but, well, and I should also say that as you look at it, you can see the compositions come in right away. So you'll see the layers of the compositions the moment that you classify those, or the moment that you apply those to those walls. Now, there are other ways that you can use the structure browser to start to define selections. You're now able to do queries on the overall BIM, so that if we wanted to type a query that allowed us to identify walls of lower than a certain height, we can input that, and then it creates the selection set. Now we can pick them again from the structure browser, and then we have another group that we can apply compositions to. This may seem sort of redundant for a demonstration, but think about what's happening. We're cycling through applying compositions to all the elements very quickly so that we can then take our design and explore our ideas at the next level. We can also step into the interior and show how we can complete applying the compositions for a set of things, and then how we can start to move forward and look at even higher levels of detail and start playing with that more. So, yes, you can apply compositions to sets. You can also just quickly drag and drop them from the compositions panel directly into the BIM, so that if you wanted to select a floor or the floors and then also select the roof, you can do that. Now, once we have that level of information present within the BIM, we can select maybe a group of planes that we want to, or a group of components that we want to start editing. We can turn on the compositions, and then similar to the way that you saw Jacob pushing and pulling to create the form for the building, we can also do that with the layers of the compositions. So we can start to redefine or shape this detail in a way that we want. And you have the similar tools with the ruler and other things that you had previously. So check. We're starting to see how we can reshape details, but how has Propagate been expanded to build on this and also be applied to other applications?
Well, the Propagate tool has already been anticipated highly this morning, but in fact, Propagate is a full reworking of a tool we released last year. It was then called BIM Suggest, but actually we fully rewrote it, and it's now a very generic detail propagator. It's really mentioned to propagate any detail connected to its environment all through your model. To prove that we can still do what our previous tool can do, we have made the connection here with the slab and the wall, but now we can just add even an insulation block. It doesn't matter, you can add extra details to it, and these will be copied and propagated along. So the workflow now actually continues as it did before. So Jacob has selected this detail. which will select this detail. Now, here is the detail. This is an extrudable detail, so this means that we can just apply this detail everywhere where the same walls and slabs connect, and we can, on each place, change the length to the length that is needed of this detail. So this is just like, this is not that much extra with what we did last year. I said that we really reworked this tool, so now this year we will show a few other applications of it.
And check, just to clarify, so Jacob was showing that insulation block that's continuous, so the model is changing all across the length of that, not just at where the section is cut, is that correct?
Yes, indeed. This detail was found on a section between the walls and the slabs. Therefore, it knows that it can be elongated along the length of that wall. So therefore, it can adjust its length everywhere in the model to all the lengths of the wall. The next application we will show is adding a wall cap to these little railing walls. That's with another specialization of this propagation tool, where we propagate along an edge. Here you just start with a small wall cap, just design it from scratch or you import it somewhere. And now you can propagate it all along the edges of these similar surfaces. So again, the detail is found. Now it's shown where it all can be applied. So if there are locations like on this top roof, you don't want this cap, so you can just click it off. Now you can apply it. And what is also interesting to note is that also the corners of these details are fixed. So because their wall caps come together, you have to add their emitter. Jacob will now select or show another application which involves a window. But before he goes there, or while he goes there, I have to say that tomorrow in the in-depth session, we will show a lot more applications of these tools in other contexts. For instance, also in a more structural model, where you can propagate a detailed connection between structural elements to other locations. So at this moment, Jacob has just inserted a window in this roof. This is, if you want to propagate this is a detail inside the surface. So typically you want to have more than one copy of this detail in a surface. So we added, if you have this kind of details, kind of a contextual menu, where you can just choose how much of these details you want, and you just create a roof full of windows.
So you're not just limited to the original options that are proposed. You can continue to expand that and then start to edit the overall group.
Exactly. What's also important to note is it is not just a copy that we do, because each of these roofs is connected to this, or each of these windows is connected to the roof in a particular way. So the roof have in each of these locations be sculpted so that these windows suits there perfectly.
Oh, that's great. And it's definitely a lot easier, and you can be more creative with it than if you were doing just an array or a series of copies as well.
Yeah, indeed.
All right, we're starting to carry the design further, but let's look at another way that we can start to add detail to it. You saw Jacob earlier dragging a component into on the back side of the building. We can do that also by activating the components panel. You can select doors or other entities and drag and drop them into the model. You can choose the location, and then you've introduced it into your BIM. Now, the interesting thing about this component is it's a Revit family, and so it's an RFA file. And did I mention that this is a Revit family? An RFA file. So this opens up the opportunity that you have to bring content into your BIM. We can also do that in other ways as well. So we can step inside the design as well. If we wanted to add to the components, I should say, not only does it have a new look and feel, but it also has a lot more content included and a lot more components. But if you wanted to add your own custom set to it, you can easily do that by adding a path, And then what we'll do is we'll make a selection and introduce a set of freely available IKEA Revit families that we can bring into the component panel. And then once we can select the folder that those are in, and then now we've got that as a part of our palette of what we can use for components, and we can drag and drop them into the interior and start to quickly add a bunch of components and start to explore how that influences the interior design of the space. If we want to make some other design changes, we're able to do that. So pretty easily you can see how you can start to build up your design in this way as well, adding detail that comes with the components into the overall BIM. So now let's step back to the exterior and go back to that, oh, did I mention it was a Revit family door? So let's open that door and take a look at it. So somewhat complex model. We can also look at the mechanical browser and check if it has any parameters or constraints associated with it. In this case, this one doesn't, so we're not really able to resize it within the BIM and kind of start to manipulate that more. So we'll activate the subtract solid that's associated with that component, and we'll use a tool called parameterize. Now, what we can do with this is that then we can parameterize that Revit family into a parametric component that when we select on the mechanical browser, now you're able to see it has a few parameters and a few constraints associated with it. So then we can start to explore, because one of the challenges with dealing with components, or at least a challenge I've had, is understanding what parameter moves what and to what extent. So we could end up selecting a parameter. You can right-click, and then now you're able to animate the parameters. So you can start to see what that parameter is controlling. Then we could change the name of it if we want to have it to where it's more easily recognizable when we go back to the BIM as well. You can explore the other parameters in the same way, where you can animate them. In this case, we're looking at the bar between the two panes of lower glazing in the door. We can rename that as well. Then we can save our new parameterized Revit family component. And we can go back to the BIM. Now we can highlight it and replace it using the quad. And then now when we select, I'm getting ahead of you. And now that when we select it, we're able to look at the properties, and we'll see that the parameters are there. And we can start to explore, this becomes another part of the design where we can start to look at if we change the width of that door, what it ultimately looks like, if we want to make it bigger, smaller, and if we want to change any of the other parameters, such as the one we named, which is looking at the height of the panel between, of the member between the glazing. So that's just showing you quickly ways that you can not only bring other types of content into the BIM, but you can also parameterize it and add more flexibility for what you're doing with the design. So in this section, we showed you how you can quickly go from a blank screen to a design idea concept pretty quickly, how you can add other detail to the BIM, and how you can use AI through Propagate and other approaches to carry the design farther, further, faster.